Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Woo.
That was lame. Good afternoon. Hey, all right. That is so much better
That's
and not
much
at all
better.
prompted, so thank you for that. My name is Adam Leff. I am the technical community advocate for InSpec at Chef. It's my privilege and pleasure to have with me two fine gentlemen from Optum, Tom Rennaker and Odie Routh. Tom?
Oh. I'm Tom Rennaker. I manage the compliance support services team, and we're really responsible for making sure that all the servers that we support are compliant, not only with our standard corporate baselines, but also in certain cases we have a lot of regulatory controls that we have to make sure are in place. So that's what we do.
Great. Odie.
All right. So I am a foundation engineer, and in Optum, it really kind of plays out that I play the role of DevOps advocate in the infrastructure services side of our organization. So we'll scope it at that for now.
Cool. Thanks so much. Before we get started hearing about these fine guys' experience with compliance, talk to you a little bit about InSpec first. So historically, with InSpec, if my clicker will work, there we go. With compliance and security, usually there's three primary groups responsible or find themselves responsible for compliance and security, and each of them have their own tools with which they feel most comfortable. Your compliance officers find comfort in their Excel spreadsheets and PDFs because that is the way compliance information is usually disseminated. Security engineers, if you're lucky enough to have great security engineers, usually have penetration testing tools, other advanced shell techniques that they would use in order to test systems for vulnerabilities. And DevOps engineers know how to harness the power of infrastructure automation in order to be able to make changes across many, many systems in order to bring them up to snuff for some sort of compliance or security need. InSpec provides a single language that allows these three groups to communicate with one another by being able to write your compliance requirements in a human-readable language, but also in an executable language to allow you to automate those compliance needs. On the left-hand side is an example of what a CIS benchmark might look like. Those of you that are required to follow CIS benchmarks, you might be having twitches right now because those PDFs all look the same, and just the sight of it is making you nervous. But the nice thing is they do have code snippets that you can usually use to test whether a machine is up to snuff or not. But a security officer might not understand that technology piece. Also, you can't toss a PDF at a server and have it tell you if it's compliant with it or not. On the right-hand side is what an InSpec control looks like. We can take that metadata from that control, embed it within our actual tests, and still have that be executable. So when you get the report from InSpec, you have all the context you need in order to determine what this control, what this test is about, but it's also executable. I can automate this and scan across my fleet. To scan with InSpec, we provide an InSpec CLI, so you just type InSpec exec and then a path to a profile, and that would execute locally on a machine. But InSpec can also run remotely. As long as we can log into a machine, we can scan it. So we can scan via SSH, and we can scan via WinRM. In both cases, we do not install any software on the target machine in order to scan it. So as long as we can log in, we can scan for compliance. Also, one of my favorite features is being able to scan a running Docker container, so we can reach in via the Docker API and run the same exact InSpec checks against a running container, even if we didn't create that container, which I find to be pretty cool. And the ultimate way of doing this is with continuous compliance, which we heard during the keynote today. One of the ways we can achieve that is by using the Audit Cookbook. And the Audit Cookbook runs as part of your normal Chef client runs, and during your Chef client run, we'll run whatever InSpec profiles you tell it to and feed that information back to Chef Automate. Really, really neat way of seeing compliance across your fleet in real time, rather than the once a year the auditor walks in the door. If you'd like to learn more about InSpec, you can go to inspec.io. There's a whole bunch of tutorials and documentation, and even an in-browser demo if you want to just get your hands on it. So whenever tackling a new challenge, such as how do we handle compliance events, it's great to have a framework in order to evaluate the situation, make a plan, and then execute it. And I like to use the OODA loop. If you've never heard of it, the OODA loop, sometimes called the Boyd cycle, after the colonel from the US Marine Corps, John Boyd, that created it. But the OODA loop has 4 steps: observe, orient, decide, and act. The observe step is about understanding the situation. For compliance, this might be What's the new requirement? Is there a vulnerability that's been announced, and I know that because a CVE was announced and released? Or maybe there's a product change. Your product team has decided you're now taking credit cards, and now PCI is a world of hurt for you that you have just inherited. So observing is about collecting the information and knowing about the situation so you can decide how best to proceed. While the orient step is about gathering the data you need in order to assess impact and severity. So what part of my fleet does this new compliance requirement now apply? Is it all of my fleet or a subset? So those sorts of information we can collect. If it's a vulnerability, what parts of my fleet are already currently vulnerable and need action? We need to mitigate that vulnerability today. InSpec fits into the orient step and excellently. We can use InSpec, write a control, write a profile, execute it across our fleet and collect that data. Once we have that data, we can decide how best to proceed. Is this a vulnerability that requires us to drop everything and fix it now? Or is this a product change that needs to get put into my product team's backlog and prioritized accordingly? And obviously, once we've got that green light to act, we can proceed and put that plan into action. These two fine gentlemen here have been going through some pretty impressive transformation, tackling some challenges, which is awesome considering the size of Optum. Optum is a huge, huge company. So over the past year, these two have been part of a team that's been working to transform the way they handle compliance and compliance automation. So thank you for being here and being willing to discuss this with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
So first off, as I'm sure many people in this audience can relate, I understand that getting a new host online and provisioned and ready to go could be somewhat painful for you. Tom, why don't you kind of walk us through what that process was like?
Yeah, and like Adam said, we're a pretty big company, and getting stuff out from conception to production is a pretty involved process and involved a lot of people. And typically, our environment was pretty siloed. So you'd have a team that would spec out the server. You'd have a team that would order the server. You'd have some other team to assemble the hardware. Another team to install and configure the OS. Another team to apply the compliance standards. Another team to check all that work, do all the QA, and then another team to support it when it's in production. So there's many handoffs, and we've taken that picture of the way it was, and we've really tried to automate a lot of those steps in the process, from the time you push a button to the time it comes out the other end. We've come a long way in that process, and to get rid of some of those handoffs that would cause a lot of those delays.
But for those that don't know, Optum is a healthcare-focused company. So compliance, having these servers be compliant and remain compliant is absolutely critical. What were the processes before you embarked on this journey? What were the processes that you and your team used in order to ensure operating system compliance?
Yeah, so we always got the job done, right? The servers are always compliant, but the process was very manually intensive and took a long time. So the servers were built during that process that I described, and they'd all have a set of standard controls and baselines applied to them. And in Windows case, we'd hold them in place with GPOs. And in other cases, we would periodically scan them, using scripts and other automation tools, and remediate anything that drifted. And then if the server needed some stricter controls on it, like you mentioned, PCI and some of the other controls, most often we wouldn't know that until the server was already in the customer's hands. And we would have to ask the customer to take an outage to say, okay, we got to go apply these rules, these controls now. So that caused a lot of pain points there to get the server up to the compliance standards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Odie, what did that look like from outside? You're not in Tom's team directly, so as a potential customer of this pipeline of servers getting created, what did that process look like and feel like to you?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a tense process. There was, given that handoff and being something that tacks on very late in the whole process. It was tense. It was always pushing up against deadlines, and like you mentioned, having to take outages, and there were periods of time where, being a team that has a server that we're putting in production, you have to be hands off so that the compliance team can come in and do what they need to do and go through that outage piece. So it's a tense relationship. It was never good news to be talking to the compliance team.
And usually never is.
Nobody likes us.
That's okay.
Well, I'm curious, like in the room, like how many people are in a compliance team or are responsible for enforcement of compliance?
So, tidbit, every person's hand should be up right now. Right. So that my first slide, I kind of lied about this, right? That there are three groups. Like compliance is everyone's responsibility, right? So if you don't have a way to automate, and this is a manual process, everyone feels the pain, whether you're on the receiving end or the delivering end. So it's very critical, super critical.
Yeah.
So I've heard challenges. I'm sure there's more. But as you reflect back on what it was like to first create a host, what were the first objectives you wanted to tackle this year in the world of compliance automation? Odie, why don't we start with you?
Okay, yeah, starting out, a big one for us was the notion of shifting left. We'd been talking a lot about the notion of treating security and compliance as factors of quality, and our teams were really working towards continuous integration and doing a lot of quality testing, and we wanted to figure out how to be getting that piece earlier in the process and start having that relationship with compliance being a feedback relationship rather than a handoff relationship and a bad news relationship. So there was a real desire to make that a part of everyone's everyday work. Another factor too that for me, a goal in talking this through is I saw this potential for us to be talking about compliance as a continuously improving journey, and so that we could get Tom's team to be putting more energy in moving compliance and moving our baselines forward rather than spending all their energy doing the repetitive work of enforcement. So I thought they could scale much better and do more interesting things.
How about you, Tom? Obviously, being part of the team that delivers these machines, what were the objectives you wanted to solve this first year?
I guess for us, the biggest thing was having that visibility into the compliance state of our servers. I mean, we had to do a lot of manual stuff to just get that data, and we built some automation around it, but, there was a lot of work that went into actually knowing, and being confident that our servers were compliant. And that was the biggest first step for us, was just seeing.
So insight, visibility, both pre-delivery and post-delivery were critical things for you to tackle.
Yeah.
Got it.
I didn't mention, but I also think another piece was to try to make that visibility more self-serve for teams as well. So in a lot of cases, our baselines and our information isn't necessarily in everyone's hands. Not everyone looks at those PDFs, and not everyone is necessarily in touch with it. But it really seemed that getting that feedback from compliance while people were trying to deliver hosts gave them a better chance to be engaged with understanding what it was to be compliant and what they needed to do, and to be more informed as well. So
great.
And also, we needed an easier way to bring our servers into compliance, the ones that drifted or weren't compliant from the beginning. We needed an easier way to do that, and because it took a long time, that process took a long time to get the servers compliant. And servers were, in our environment, the amount of servers was growing exponentially, and our staff wasn't. So we definitely needed an easier way to do that.
Who can relate to that? Yeah, again, everyone's hand should probably be up for that. It's okay if you're shy, but I know the truth. So, Chef, great tool to help do the infrastructure piece. Obviously, we're talking about InSpec being a critical component to doing the compliance automation part of it. How have these two tools helped you bridge the gap with other teams and convince even your teams alone, as well as other teams you work with, that using Chef and InSpec are the right thing to do here? Tom, why don't you start?
I don't know, you want to take that one first?
Okay, yeah. I mean, for me, it was really about flexibility. I think being able to use InSpec in so many ways, much like what you just talked about at the beginning, of being able to run it remotely without an agent on some hosts, being able to put it in with an Audit Cookbook and run it on running servers, being able to use it on someone's desktop while they're doing development to check where they are. There were just so many opportunities to use it over and over again, and so that flexibility was a real strong point. Another key factor was it being open source. It was really easy for us to do proof of concepts and to do some show me and to go take part of our baseline and lay it out and show other teams how easy it was to get that feedback on what was wrong with systems or how their changes were going to impact it.
Yeah, and also, we had multiple tools that we used, tools for Windows servers, tools for Linux servers. What we really like about InSpec and Chef is we have one tool set, and it's one language that reaches across all those OSs, and the power of that is just pretty compelling. So.
For the record, as the community guy for InSpec, I did not pay him to just say that. So thank you, Tom. Check's in the mail, I guess.
No endorsement.
No, it's great. Absolutely not. No endorsements. So what did the rollout look like? How did you get started? I mean, such a huge company, analysis paralysis is really a thing. Tom, how did you start rolling this out, and how did you convince people to follow you?
I guess the first thing, we really saw the benefits and the like I said, we were looking for an easier way to do what we do, and we dug into it and started looking at InSpec and just learned a little bit about it and a little bit of Ruby, and it's pretty easy to learn. So we started with that, and it really helped that there's tons of examples. The documentation is awesome, and the chef community is a great source of help too, to dig in, and people are really more than willing to help out and post a question and you get an answer right away. It's awesome.
That's great.
And we really just kind of took that and just wrote a couple tests, ran it, saw it in action. From there, then we wrote a chef recipe to fix that result. We saw it fail. We wrote a recipe to fix it, and then we ran the InSpec test again, and we saw it passing. And we kind of just scaled it up from there, and started spinning up VMs on our laptops where we can run. We started using Test Kitchen where we can run all that stuff on a little VM on your laptop and prove that it can really affect a VM, and just kept scaling it from there, and we kept showing management that look how easy this is, look how fast we can do this in our, and it just kind of grew from there and do little proof of concepts here and there. And
yeah.
Awesome.
I think a key thing that happened in the early stages to even before rolling it out was around collaboration. I think we started having some sessions. We'd meet every week and start doing pairing, and we'd look together and do some code review and kind of work in the practices and start looking at how this happens in a pipeline and then trying to use it in a pipeline and yeah, just incrementally went there, but it was collaboration like our organization is not used to. That we had people from several different groups coming together and working through those.
That's a key part of DevOps transformation, something that we at Chef evangelize as much as possible, right? There are no DevOps tools you just buy. This is a transformation exercise to get teams working together in ways that weren't possible, and to hear that compliance automation is allowing you to do that is very exciting.
It's crazy.
I think that's really great.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things about the OODA loop is that it's a loop. You should be continuing to do this over and over and over again. And I kind of lied when I drew the loop because there are more lines to it, but I didn't want the sides to be busy. One of the key fundamental parts of the loop is that you collect feedback at every step. And you OODA your OODA, if you will. How can we make this loop better each time? So as we sit here and we reflect over the past year, for you gentlemen, what you've been working on. How did the year go? Like, how did this past 12 months, this journey, work for you? Tom, go ahead. What do you got?
Well, traditionally, our team was more of a operating system support admin type role. We weren't developers, right? So we automated things out of necessity just because of our growth and the amount of servers that we had to support. And excuse me, my team really took on that it was a really amazing transformation to see that people always looking for new ways to automate what we were doing, and they just dove right in, picking up InSpec and just seeing how cool it was. I mean, it really is cool. I mean, they just picked it up and started running with it, and just to see them turn from somebody that logs into a server to make a change to somebody that thinks about writing code to do the same thing. It was cool to see.
As a people manager, I have to imagine that seeing your team have light bulb moments of this is a tool that can solve a problem is a pretty energizing thing to experience.
Right.
Odie, how about you? How did this year go for you?
Participating in the transformation of your team was absolutely awesome. I think it was definitely the highlights of my job for the last year. And it was amazing to experience that. I also feel a lot of satisfaction in seeing where we've come in this last year to kind of proving a key point. So we put a lot of energy, especially in the healthcare field, into safety and having a lot of controls in place and audit, and there's zero tolerance. Our level of acceptance for risk is very, very low, and PHI is one of those. We heard the gradation this morning, and PHI pushes up there, to 5, and so it's important. And so looking back at this last year, it's been proof that we really could use these practices to make a safe system of work so that we could increase our velocity and we could drive in that direction. So I actually gave a talk a year ago in this room, kind of talking about the idea of how this is going to be a great opportunity for healthcare to really jump forward in DevOps, because we start bringing in those degrees of controls and that need for safe systems and into this process and really dive forward with it. And I think this year has really been a major step in proving that.
I kind of get the feeling that you might not be alone, given the amount of people that are in this room wanting to hear your story also, right? Because healthcare is not the only sector that could use this transformation. Yep. So this is wonderful. I'm sure this process did not happen without some bumps in the road. So I want to hear first about technical challenges. What sort of technical issues did you run into, or other technical hurdles did you experience as you were starting on this compliance automation journey? Tom, we'll start with you. How about you and your team?
Just the nature of our environment and the way that we have to ensure that isolation of data, certain things have to be isolated and you can't reach in. It can't be in a common core network. That the big challenge for that is we have tons of firewalls in place, and and you have to be able to reach into those environments and collect the data and be able to affect that change. And I think some of that stuff, I mean, we're still fighting that and figuring all that stuff out. But I think we've come a long way to know that how to do it and the right way to do it, and we've really been able to make some progress there. And then for us, writing some of the InSpec tests to it's fairly easy to write an InSpec test that you can gather information from a server, but what we've really started doing now is reaching out into other systems and other areas where we have to collect that data from other systems. Reaching out using APIs now and not just going onto a server to gather information. So some of those things are challenging as well because, like I said, we're not developers by nature, and learning how to do some of that stuff has been a little challenge too.
So this feels like, I know when we talked last week, that even though you don't need to know Ruby to use InSpec, it certainly helps. But of course, that is a challenge as well. So hearing that you're starting to expand the use of InSpec and sort of push the borders of what it can do, it's nice to know that the Ruby language is there for you. But obviously, if you have a team of people that would not normally call themselves software engineers, that feels like a hurdle. It's a hurdle, but it feels like a hurdle possibly worth hurdling, right?
It is, and the great thing about InSpec is you don't have to start with pure InSpec and pure Ruby. You can take a PowerShell script that you've been using for years, plug it in to an InSpec test, and it'll work. And you can later go back and refactor that and make it pretty, Great. But you can take what you're comfortable with and start there, which is a great thing.
Awesome.
Great way to make that transition.
Odie, from your perspective, any technical challenges you'd want to speak to?
I could go pretty long on that list. So
looking at the clock.
I'm thinking, maybe we could, if people are interested in some of those afterwards, we could certainly talk about those in a breakout room or something.
How about the non-technical challenges?
Yeah,
I would love to hear those.
Yeah, let's go that direction. So, one of the biggies for us, and I imagine it's true for a lot of people, we're talking about a transformation around workflow and culture, but there's a real skills transformation involved when we're talking about teams working in this space and trying to put as code into something that's been done in PDFs for so long. So, having the discussion around being test-driven and how to do test-driven development and having pipelines and having all these pieces that will version control. I'll actually say that I do more time teaching Git than I do teaching any of the other, because it's just getting these teams used to version control as part of their workflow is just such a shift. So that transition takes a lot of time, and that's been a challenge for us to feel like we're going as far as we want to, because there's just so much retooling for our staff.
And I think, for me, being on the compliance team and not always being that friendly face that you want to hear from, I think breaking down those silos that we've historically had, and just reaching out to another team and just starting an open discussion, it can be challenging because people are naturally resistant to change. They're like, well, that's always the way we've done it, that it works, why do we need to do this new thing? And we have found, I think, that just starting that conversation, just start talking about it, is really the first step, and it makes a huge difference. At least it has for us so far.
Yeah. And, you mentioned that we're a large company, and with that large company comes a lot of complexity. And so you end up with lots of different teams that have ownership or responsibility for lots of different things. And trying to get a sort of unified notion of how to tackle pieces and which team should really be responsible for which piece of code has been an interesting non-technical challenge as well.
And it's also that trying to relay that message that compliance is not just my team's job, right? We're not the only ones responsible for it. It should be everybody. It should be, from the beginning to the end, And we're moving compliance to the left, but everybody needs to be concerned about it.
And we keep saying your company is large. How large is large? Can you tell us how many people work at Optum?
I couldn't give you an accurate
Okay.
figure. So Optum is member of a family of companies that together make up United Health Group. So we're providing technology for a variety of other sister companies, I guess we'll call them. And together we're talking hundreds, thousands.
Ridiculous amount of people.
Yes.
And to bring even a subset of that along with you on a journey is a task. I mean, that's work. That's hard work you have to do. So as we reflect on how that year went and the challenges that you both overcame and still need to overcome, what are the next steps for your team? What's the next big thing that you want to do this year?
For us, and I know Odie's been involved in this too, we're also responsible for not only the security baselines and stuff like that, but we're responsible for making sure that all the servers are up to the current patch level. And that's our next big thing this year that we want to really tackle is how do we bring in that process that we go through? How do we, can we use InSpec? Can we use Chef to really drive that, the whole patching process? And we're doing a few little POCs and making some progress there, and it's pretty promising. So we're continuing down that road. And then really we want to share our success with the rest of Optum and really just say, look what we've done, with this little ragtag group of people, and just really relay that message out across the company and just keep those discussions going.
Yeah, encouraging other teams to use what's been built and how to find it is I mean, there's a lot of internal marketing that we have to do to really get it to be reusable the way we can view it. I'll also add, I'm really interested in the coming year to be thinking about how we start bridging into the documentation and the audit side of things. So, now we've got this great feedback, and we've talked about how to give that feedback to teams that are getting work into pipelines. But we've also talked about how having the always audit and having all that ability, being able to bring that together and start iterating on our baselines that we have to really start getting all the metadata caught up and all of the controls referenced to where they map to in different regulations. And then being able to really tie that into our documentation as evidence and have it accepted by auditors as evidence is I think, an interesting journey for us ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's wonderful. Are there any major hurdles as you decide how next best to proceed? You've mentioned a couple already. Is there any other glaring things that you feel like you need to tackle before you're properly empowered or have what you need in order to go down that path and start on that next step of your journey? It's okay if the answer is no. I would love for the answer to be. You would too.
I think for me, finding more champions and building mass within our organization of partners who are also moving the effort forward. It takes a lot of energy to keep doing demos and keep doing POCs over and over again to people and trying to convince every group that you reach. And having that number of champions grow in our organization, to just see them keep taking that next step is going to be something that I feel like we're going to need to really go all the way. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. And we over this past year, I think we formed a team that's kind of the chef as a service type team, where they're really driving that, trying to drive that visibility of Chef and InSpec throughout our company, and really trying to onboard people into using it, and the running community meetings and stuff like that. And I really have a vision that we build our own little chef community within Optum, and I think it can happen. And I think we're well on the way for that.
Like you're well on the way. Yeah, that's great. So it's time to pass along something. I got a kick out of this clip. I had to I had to put that up. Usually that's how we receive compliance rules, but now I'm asking you to pass on additional information. For those that are here with us, what is the one tidbit, one nugget that you'd like to pass on of encouragement or guidance? Tom, let's start with you.
I guess for me, I would just say, based off of what my team did, I'd just say just try it, just do it. Just get something started. Start small, and just do little proof of concepts and start small and it'll spread. And like for us, it just spreads into other areas and other groups kind of look to you and say, wow, they did it, we can do it.
I'm gonna go back to probably the same nugget that probably everyone has heard from Nathan Harvey and from every single DevOps talk you've ever heard, and I guess I'm just gonna pound it in one more time. It's people first. It's reach out and talk to someone and find out, so for those people that have to work with a compliance group who are not in the compliance group, connect with one of them. Start talking about what they do, how they do it, what it's like, and what they struggle with, and vice versa. If you're somebody in a compliance group, be reaching out to a dev group or be reaching out to an operations group and start hearing about what the problems are like and start talking about what your pain points are, because chances are between you're going to suddenly start to have ideas about those pain points. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's really where the last year started, was just people not in the same team talking to each other, figuring out what it's like on that other side of the fence or in that other silo, and working from there. And I think you can't do it without that initial connection or building that relationship.
Yeah, we really had no idea who each other were, and we just all of a sudden had this conversation, and it just blew up from there, and just start talking.
Awesome. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to come up here on stage and talk to a room full of people and let us peek behind the curtain. So please join me in thanking Tom and Odie for sharing.
Thank you, Adam.
With that, we have some time for questions. I will be the audience runaround person, so if anyone has a question, just raise your hand, stand up, and I'll come find you. Anything at all? Yes?
Thank you. Question. Why do you choose Chef, in this case, InSpec, instead of another conflict management tool like, I don't know, Puppet, Ansible, whatever it is? What was the key to use Chef, in this case, InSpec?
That's a really complicated question, partly because it's a large organization, and to some degree the chef decision was already made independent of the compliance group. So the chef piece was pretty well already there. For us to have the discussion, though, about InSpec and diving in, we were already looking at how to work around Chef with audit mode and using server spec out of band to check things and trying to figure out what we could do before InSpec really came before us. But once InSpec appeared and it was very clear that the control structure just made a great deal of sense, and it was very applicable. And it was a lot less overhead than trying to figure out how to do the other options. So the chef piece came first, and InSpec was just
just fell into place.
Yeah.
So with your compliance teams, are you guys still defining all the requirements still on the Excel spreadsheets, or you're getting all your teams compliance and security to all start with everything from InSpec and then using writing your solutions out in Chef, or do you still use on Excel spreadsheet with what do you want to do with this, and then translate the requirements into InSpec, and what are the are you guys still following the model, or is it everyone's just going to fall into just a uniformity?
Yeah, I think we're still at that point where we do have that published PDF, right? And that gets approved and reviewed all the time right now. And my team has to turn that into code. So we're still at that point where we still have that source of the published PDF. And
I'll add into that. We're an organization that's in that transition box. So, and And it's a large organization, as we've said, so it's a large battleship to turn. And so we work a lot in baby steps when we're talking about change. So having this there gives us that momentum, and we're working towards being able to prove that, you know what, having it in version control as source is a great way to go, and all that extra added is maybe not necessary. I am interested, though, because there's always going to be a need for the document or the artifact that is read by the business or read by auditors. And in a lot of respects, so there's some projects out there around, you know, compiling documentation, and I'm interested in ways that we may think about that InSpec getting that artifact that produces from the code that's really in that document format for people to review. But hopefully that, you know, authoritative source will be version control one day. Yep.
With that, thank you again. Another big round of applause for Tom and Odie. And thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank Adam for just like picking this ball up and doing this with us. It's been awesome.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And
participating.
Tom,
We're great.
thank you.
Good job, guys. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the conference.